Okay, small grains update, variety update. Jim Anderson and I put this together. I added a couple of slides because I couldn't help myself between when Corrine asked me to submit the PowerPoint and a couple of minutes ago. We'll get into those. So hindsight, 62 bushels per acre was the state average. That's only a bushel more than the year before. But as you noticed, 62 bushels, where the heck did that come from? Because I don't know if you knew, if you noticed, but it was a relatively tad dry, basically carried over from the year before. And yes, the snow melted and most of it went down, but there were spots in the valley that didn't get any rain after that and not rain until basically grain fill was done. So to get to 62 bushels, you have to pinch yourself. Now, basically, if we look at the long-term trend line, we're kind of back to where we ought to be. This is when I started my job in 1995. We were basically 37 bushel for a state average in wheat. If you follow the trend line, the last 2 years have been smack dab on the trend line. The record was set in 17 at 67 bushels per acre. And prior to last year, we had a 4-year downward, where I was worried. I couldn't always explain why we were getting beat up so bad. On average, if you follow this regression, it's tapered down a little bit because of these have a fair amount of weight in the linear regression, but we're marching ahead at about 0.8 bushels per acre per year, year over year, every single year. That's pretty decent, and that's genetics and management. It's not just genetics, it's not just management, it's both. This was the drought monitor in Minnesota on the beginning of grain fill. So basically the second week of July, I believe, is when I grabbed this. There was no part in the state that was not dry. It only ranged from abnormally dry, 20%, to moderate drought, to severe drought, to extreme drought. Now that's based on climate normals. That doesn't mean there isn't spots in the state that had adequate water. It just means that the total amount of precip, cumulative, was a certain percent below at that point in time. Now the interesting thing, and why we got to 62 bushels, I think part of it, is May and June were hot, July was not. They flip-flopped. And this is monthly average temperature anomalies from the Crookston Northwest Research Experiment Station. This starts in 2018, and this is basically to the end of this year, just started. Whenever there's a blue bar, it's below the climate normal. Whenever there's a red bar, it's above the climate normal data. Yes, it's a little small. I'm sorry, Blake. But look how basically May and June, that's these two red bars here, were much, much higher than normal, followed by a very cool or a relatively cool June. And we all remember how cold last winter was. That's these blue bars. And we all know how warm this past December was. That's how you have to interpret this. So cooler temperatures, average, this is average temperature, not daily max temperatures, average temperatures. Okay, if you look at the daytime temperatures, they were about 5 degrees cooler than average for July. The big difference came in nighttime temperatures, 10 degrees cooler than normal. How can that be in July? Any ideas? It was dry. No dew points, or very low dew points. Happy small grains. Miserable corn. So this is wrong, sorry. I have to change that yet. These are the U of M releases from as of late, the last one being Rothsay. We're not going to release, we didn't release anything last year, we're not going to release anything this coming year. Right now, we're having a tough time beating Rothsay in our trials. And I'll show you in a little bit what that is. Right now, Torgy has the second largest acreage at just short of 19%. Linkert still holds on at 6%. Everything in between is basically out of the market already. If you look at the other variety surveys, Torgy is second, Valda hangs in as third, Rothsay came in as fifth, and W9590 was the largest variety by acreage. New releases, first time tested. South Dakota released Braun, Cropland Genetics entered 3322, Lima Grain entered Boom, and 21st Century Genetics. Greg Fox has retired, but this is still one of his releases. TCG Teddy. The first three are PVP, not always are rewarded, but basically when you say PVP 94 pending, basically that means it's going to get PVP, it's going to be certified in registered classes of seed only, but you can have farm-safe seed. With patented varieties, you cannot have farm-safe seed. So grain yield across the northern locations. Northern locations in this case starts from Fergus Falls to Roseau and everything in between. It's about 8 locations in total. Purley, Oakley, Stephen, Hallock, Humboldt, Strathcona, Roseau itself, Crookston. Unfortunately, Roseau got hailed out, so we lost that data point. If you look at this table, 3099A, the last 2 years has been one of the top yielders. Now I'm going to warn you, if you think Torgy is late, you haven't seen 3099A yet. It's extremely late maturing. We think it's too late. But in the past 2 years, it hasn't suffered what we normally would expect with late maturing varieties. Late maturing varieties tend to indeed fizzle out with very low test weight because we expect it on average to be warmer during grain fill. Well, soon as July is cooler, it doesn't suffer. And then you can see it bumping up in the yields, in the yield trials. Anything in bold are these entries that were tested for the first time. So from CP 3099 down to Trigger, Buster we've known as high yielding one. PF Buns is a late one as well. You have to get down to Valda to see some of the more named varieties. Rothsay is just above that. Torgy is a little bit lower. We'll get back to that. And Linkert, you know, was never a high-yielding variety. Why did people like Linkert? Why was it at one time a third of the acres? I'm just going to keep moving and keep you on your toes. It combined so nice, and it wouldn't lodge, and it all these other things, and very nice quality. Now, protein and baking quality. Protein is 1 year average across the north. 94 and 79 wins out. Linkert is coming in as third. 9590 comes in as fourth. It's one of the reasons 9590 is liked so much. It's very good protein. It's very good straw strength. It is decent yield. It's just very susceptible to scab. That's the thing that keeps worrying me about it. But for the rest, all the agronomics on 9590 are very good, which is why it's #1 overall in acres. But, you know, highest yield, lowest protein. Now, can you manage this to get higher? Yeah. Understand that in my yield trials, every single variety gets the same amount of nitrogen. I don't spoon feed individual varieties with different amounts of N. I can't. So you don't have to end up with 12% protein on 3099. Can you get it to 14? It's probably going to be a tall order. Does it matter in the marketplace? Well, I can tell you after the marketing year is complete whether or not it mattered. Because don't ask me to forecast that. Last couple of years it hasn't.
It does this year.
Hmm?
It does this year.
It does this year, a little bit.
Right now, if you want to sell wheat, if it's under 14, you won't take it.
Yeah. So, straw strength. Smith, Linkert, the best. 3.5 basically means we haven't made up our mind yet, whether it's going to be a 3 or a 4. But all these are very good straw strength. Rothsay, Washburn is in there. Torgy, you start to get to a 4. These are the weaklings. 5s, most of the time, especially in the Southern Valley, I wouldn't expect to see a lot of lodging unless you get one of those beautiful straight line winds right at heading. A nice thunderstorm, she's going to take a beating at a 5. Now, you know the 3 strikes rule, 3 strikes and you're out rule, right? In wheat? With lodging? Do you know why that is? With corn, you only get 1 shot at it. At least with wheat, you have 3 shots. Or 2 shots and then the third one, it's out. Anybody know why wheat can resurrect itself twice? You ever looked at lodged wheat? Not from the combine cab. You actually have to get out in the field. Look, whenever you have that chance, go look at the nodes, the nodes itself. It looks like they got very arthritic and are swollen like hell on one side, on the shady side. That's basically the response that the plant has. The shade side, the cells will stretch out, they'll pump water in them to lift that stem back up. It can only do that twice because it's going to run out of nodes to do it. But that's why wheat can resurrect itself twice. And the third time, there's nothing left to pump and you're done for. So, FHB, yes, still important. Have we seen scab of any amount in the last couple of years? No. Would I ever go to the 7s? No. I have too much PTSD. I'm sorry. We are not going down that rabbit hole again if we don't have to. So bacterial leaf streak, this is where genetics really make a difference because you cannot use anything against bacterial leaf streak to combat it. It's a bacteria, it's not a fungus, so fungicides don't do anything. If you have a history, get to the 2s and the 3s. And there's plenty of choices if you've seen bacterial leaf streak, and where you will notice it first is drop in test weight. If you have very light grain and you've seen this thing that looks like tan spot but isn't, that probably was bacterial leaf streak. On the very susceptibles, like Gunsmoke and even the 6s here, 95, 90, it will run through it like wildfire. And it will start off where you had your tire tracks. And it will flame out off from the tire tracks, like somebody took napalm to the leaves, or 28% straight. It just burns them to the crisp. And the funny thing is, it starts from the top and goes down, where tan spot will come from the bottom, work its way up. Tan spot septoria, we have good fungicides options. It's probably overall our biggest yield robber year in, year out, but the way you manage Fusarium head blight and the combination with early season fungicides with your herbicide program, you should be able to avoid any economic damages, even if you would plant 7s, like Teddy or Commander or Cannon or Charger or Boom or Braun. Pre-harvest sprouting. Basically, 1s, you're fine. 2s, you're fine. 3s and 4s, if you have repeated wetting and drying before you get to it with harvest, you can get an unpleasant surprise. How is that translated at the elevator? It's called the Hogberg falling numbers test, low falling numbers. We have some varieties that have inherently lower falling numbers, but most years they will be just above 300. When you have a cool grain fill period like last year, those will slip into 275s to 250s. There's absolutely no sprout in them. It's just that that's a genetic trait, and the Hogberg falling numbers test is an indirect measure of sprout damage. It's not perfect. And I can have a whole meeting afterwards on how it works, etc. Okay, so the funny plots. This is the yield and protein plot I've done for years, but this is grain protein yield per acre. It's like recoverable sugar and sugar beets. Think of it that way. The red line divides this in 2 parts. These are varieties all above 14%. These are varieties all below 14%. Why? Well, because this is grain yield. C3099A is all by itself out in left field. Actually, I think it's outside the ballpark, to be honest. Because it's all the way here. I mean, there's a gap of almost, 10%, it's more than 10% before you get to Buster and Trigger. Rotse is the best combination of yield and protein. It squeezed the most protein per acre out of the nitrogen that was given to each of these trials. Linkard is, proportionally also very efficient with nitrogen, but it doesn't have the same yield. It doesn't put as much starch in it. The other ones that are in there is Gunsmoke, Reckless, Smith, Cannon. This is kind of the top here. Breeders need to be up here. Now, this is kind of alphabet soup. So that's what I was working on just now in the back, because I was doing a 5-mile training run and went, oh yeah, if I change the x-axis, and I can blow it up. So this is the center part, that alphabet soup. You can see the varieties separate out a little bit better. No idea why that one doesn't have a name. It has in the spreadsheet. I can tell you what it is if I get the spreadsheet, but something's not working with my little graphing program. But here's Torgi, that's Valda, SY 911CL2, 9590, just to give you a little bit better. You can get this afterwards. We will mail this to you if you're interested in this. So that's protein and yield. Then rank stability. Which of the varieties are the most stable across years? Because nobody likes surprises. The weather is enough of a surprise. Let's see which varieties can handle the most diverse conditions. 3099 obviously overall has the highest rank. But there is some locations where it does fall on its chin. Otherwise, it wouldn't have that much variability. Shelley is a steady Eddie. Driver is. Anything below the blue line are the more stable varieties. Valda has been bouncing around a little bit. Rotse is right here in this alphabet soup, but that's partially because I have fewer data points in this 3-year data set. Rotse will probably end up here when I have enough data points, if I had to take a guess. I don't have the data yet, we'll get there. Linkert, Heartland, 94, 95, Longmire on the bottom side here, those are the higher protein varieties. Because that's why I make this graph. We know there's an inverse relationship between grain protein and grain yield. So if you want to have just bushels, you look at this side below the blue line. If you're just interested in protein, you look on this side below the blue line. So, bottom line. It was a long day on Friday when I put this together. Like I said, the markets will want what we don't have. That's the given. So, picks. These are varieties that were at least 3 years in the trial, that are a 3 or a 4 for scab, a couple of 5s in there, and for Fusarium head blight and for BLS. They have to be a 3 or better for pre-harvest sprouting, and they have to be a 6, which is a relatively low bar for quality. You come up with Rotse, Valda, Driver, and Torgi, 3530, Cannon, Ambush, and Ballistic that meet those criteria. 9590 isn't in there. Why? Because it's a 7 for scab. We threw Linkard out because it's too weak for scab. There's a couple other varieties that are left out of this. We just look at okay, it has to meet these, otherwise it's out. Okay, one quick pitch. If you're interested in participating in the small grain survey, you'll see more notices about this. You can also scan that QR code. We have scouts running around. We need fields from you. It's also in the book. This year, we did an unpleasant discovery. Cereal leaf beetle was found for the first time in Minnesota. And that's thanks to the scouts, just north of here. Finally, the dreaded evaluation survey. Understand that when we bombard you with this, unlike the federal government that bombards you with surveys, they don't have their pay raises tied to it. We do. Hint, hint. That's it.